Expert insight, clear analysis, strategy in action. Welcome to the CEO to CEO podcast, featuring the world's top CEOs. The podcast will welcome honest conversations meant to challenge traditional ways of thinking from fellow global industry leaders. This podcast will also explore the intricate world of M&A from an insider's perspective. M&A is a big deal, one in which you can drive the future of your business, your industry, and even the trajectory of the marketplace. This podcast is hosted by Kevin Campbell, CEO of Synity. Synity is a global enterprise data solution provider specializing in data operations and data transformation. Kevin is a global champion in data and has served as the former Group Chief Executive Officer at Accenture and COO of Oscar Insurance Corporation. This week's guest is Mike Maiolo, CEO of Rizing. He has over 20 years of experience with manufacturing companies and enterprise asset management consulting services. Prior to his current role, Mr. Miolo was the CEO of Vesta, a Rizing Company, which is now Rizing's EAM division.
Welcome to this week's CEO to CEO podcast. This week, we're very fortunate to have with us Mike Miolo, who is the CEO of Rizing. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Kevin, it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much.
How about if we start out, Mike, with you telling us a little bit about your career and how you got to Rizing?
All right, that's a great question. So I'd say it's sort of a couple different chapters. Right out of college, I joined the paper industry, paper manufacturing, and spent the first 10 years working in various positions in manufacturing and sales. Ended up the last job I had, I was the business lead for a technology implementation. And I said, this is interesting, might be the next career. So actually, Rizing is my second startup. The first one was in the IBM Maximo space, and then came to Rizing as I started the EAM line of business that was originally Vesta Partners.
Why don't you tell for our audience, for people who might not know right away what EAM is, why don't you tell us what it is and what advantages that Vesta Partners and now Rizing bring?
Probably a good segue into the three lines of business that Rizing has, and tell a quick overview story there. So EAM is enterprise asset management. It's people use SAP, enterprise asset management, to take care of their capital assets. So whether you're a utility, transportation company like a rail, oil and gas, or just a discrete manufacturer, you use SAP EAM to take care of and maintain your capital assets. The second line of business, which is HCM, similar approach, although they're human capital assets. And that's where we implement success factors and help our customers get value out of the SAP HCM portfolio. And then the last piece, and big growing one for Rizing, is our consumer industries focus, which is really using SAP for retail and digital supply chain.
Which of those three was first in the Rizing portfolio, or did they all come together at the same time?
So that's a great question. It ultimately tells the story of how Rizing became Rizing. So I had started Vesta Partners along with Carl Graves, who's now the president at Rizing. And we actually joined forces with the other two lines of business through a private equity investment. So Bunker Hill Capital out of Boston brought together Inspro, who was the original success factors piece of the company, along with Inspro that became the consumer industries piece. Vesta was the third piece. And as the three came together, we wanted to simplify our go-to-market under a common brand, and that's where the name Rizing was introduced.
And you guys have had quite a bit of success over the time frame. Has it been 2 or more years since it's Rizing?
I guess it's been about 3, a little over 3 years since we branded and brought together the consolidated approach under one brand. And it's been great. It's been a lot of fun.
And what's the glue that holds the three different lines of business together?
Yeah, that's a great question. People ask all the time. And Kevin, I think to me, it's a couple different things. There are a lot of similarities in the way people want to work together. They all like to think of themselves in Rizing as a big boutique. And you think about what's really behind that. You know, in a boutique, what you have is high-end, sort of best of breed deep domain expertise around a certain area of business. For us, it's the three that we chose around SAP. And then with scale, because now, with over 1,250 employees and a global reach, we kind of think we bring a little bit of the boutique focus and a little bit of scale together in sort of one package. And then the last piece is people absolutely want to work hard to be best in their field. So they like the idea that we're focused experts. So you come to Rizing, you have 3 different lines of business where you can get a lot of training, a lot of development, a lot of certifications, so that you can rise to the top of your field as an SAP consultant.
And when Ryzen came together, is that when you became CEO, or was it at a different point?
Well, I was the CEO of Vesta Partners. And then when we joined forces through the private equity investment, I became the CEO of the consolidated business unit at that time. So now we're going back to around 2012.
So I'm always fascinated on how fellow CEOs learn and figure things out. So, you had a long experience, in asset management, started a company in that area. Now you all of a sudden got HR and consumer industries. How did you learn about those industries and what it took to be successful?
Yeah, another great question, Kevin. And honestly, if you ask my team, they'd say I'm still learning. That my focus is to bring sort of a general management focus to the business. And I believe that you don't have to be an expert in each one of the pieces in order to bring together experts that surround you to grow the company. But honestly, jumping in with both feet, watching our teams deliver, engaging with clients, to me, to do it front and center is the best way to learn, and that's how I did it.
And as we all know, we're learning. As I tell my kids, 16 is the only time in life you think you know everything. The rest of life for me is a journey after 16 of realizing every day how little I know, right? And how much more I have to go. But that's what makes it exciting. You recently completed an acquisition. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and interestingly, I'll tell a story about the acquisition, its importance, how we're growing our consumer industries team, and then also where Synity plays an important part in that. We saw huge opportunities. Of the 3 lines of business, the one that was still only in North America was our consumer industries team. Yep. Working closely with the SAP line of business people, they were constantly asking us, how do we take this really successful business and scale it for growth globally? And we just found a really perfect complement. And the company we acquired is a company called Attune, based in Sri Lanka. They were part of a bigger manufacturing company. Management team was actually based in the Boston area. But we have a huge opportunity now to grow alongside SAP. And the piece of CI that's really important in consumer industries is data is just a gigantic challenge for our big customers. And Kevin, as you know, that's one of the places where Rizing and Synity come together so well, bringing our focus on SAP, your focus on SAP, but your expertise in data. It's a nice compliment.
Yeah, it is. And as we know, data makes a huge difference in the success and the business results that people get out of whatever efforts they're doing. And certainly in consumer, we've had some nice successes together. When you're looking at an acquisition, right, and you've got a private equity firm behind you, what are you, Mike, looking for in an acquisition? Are you and your leadership team looking for an acquisition?
Yeah, there's really a couple of dimensions, Kevin, to look at. One, it has to be a business fit. Our mantra is we're all things SAP, but no things that are not SAP. So obviously it needs to be in the SAP environment. But the second part is people that think the similar way that we do here at Rizing. Yeah. It's a challenging journey, as you know, growing companies like Synity and Rizing. And if you bring together people of a similar culture that want to work hard and achieve the same kind of results together, you have a chance. So honestly, for us, it's a business fit, and Attune is a nice complement, sort of an adjacency around our CI team. But the culture and the way of going about doing our business is very important to us too, and a key part of what we look for.
Great. Well, what you've done some other, combinations and acquisitions in your career. What do you think the keys to success? What would you tell your fellow CEOs who are trying to look at acquisitions or look at them? What do you think the keys to success are?
Yeah, one, the back office integration is challenging, but we all can survive it.
Mhm.
The really important piece that you got to focus enough time and energy on is change management. When you're asking people who are successful in their own right in a boutique company to join forces with another company, even if they're tremendously excited about the opportunity, you have different people who are used to a certain way of doing things. And so focusing on change management, explaining the vision for where we're trying to go, and make sure you stay on top of that, not just day one, but every day of the journey. I think that's a key to the successful accomplishment. Yeah.
Well put. I mean, we talked to Joe Tucci, who's done, hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions of acquisitions. And he said the same thing. Find people that think like you think,
Yep.
right? Because otherwise life's too short, right? To try to get there.
Yeah. So we're trying to find people that think like us, but don't look like me. So we're getting a little picky, aren't we?
And, the other thing I think is acquisitions are hard because human nature is the two things we dislike are the way things are today and any change, right? So,
Exactly.
it's just human nature to work through there. Do you expect to continue to do more M&A with Rizing, or do you want to do organic growth, or how do you feel about balancing? I know you're private equity backed, so they want it all, but
Yeah. So I hate to sound like a consultant, but the answer is a little of both. We really want to achieve the gains that we had in mind when we went after the now 5 acquisitions we've done. But honestly, we're still with our eyes wide open, looking for opportunities that are out there. And there are some great companies that through the pandemic had some capital challenges that might be in a position to be better off joining a bigger company like Rizing. But organic growth is the main focus for now, with an eye towards finding the right add-on piece. We would certainly consider it.
my old boss, Bill Green, always said, never forget how to grow organically, because too many companies get into that acquisitions without acquisitions are great to add to and expand. But, the driving of the organic growth, as you know, is important.
Well, and Kevin, think about it. If you look at the premise, the sort of the business case for why to do the acquisition, we said 1 + 1 needs to equal 3. Well,
Yeah.
eventually you have to do the organic growth to get to the 3. So even if you think about the organic growth as a follow-on step to bringing the integration to bear from the M&A activity, eventually organic growth has to be the main engine, and that's where we're focused.
What's the future hold for Ryzen?
Well, I think the future is really bright. We picked a couple partners that fit really well. SAP seems to be headed down the right path around their cloud vision, and we're really a big fan of the Rise with SAP movement. I think there's a lot of good that's coming of that. And then honestly, I think you look at what we're doing together as partners, there's just a huge opportunity for us to grow together across the 3 lines of business. So I think we picked a good market, good partners. We have a great team, and the future is very bright for growth.
I would agree. I mean, we're excited about our partnership, but we're also excited for you and the growth that you guys see at Rizing. And as you know, we run into you all over the world, which is the benefits of being global. Now, did you like Rise with SAP, or do they owe you a royalty for using the Rise? Is that a play off Rising, or?
Well, sometimes better to be lucky than good or smart. We certainly are playing off of it, Rise with Rizing and Rise with SAP. But we do like the premise behind it. It's a good program. I think there's a lot of value embedded in it for our clients. But we think it's a great thing, both the name and the concept.
One of my long-term mentors always said, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Right. So I think
Sherry, write that down for me. That's good stuff.
So 2 questions I like to ask all of our guests, because I think it's important part of not forgetting how we got here, but also in continuing for all of us to grow, is who have been your mentors along the way?
That's a great question. Also a tough one. I've had many business mentors over the years and just been very fortunate to have some really good bosses. But the simple answer for me is my dad. Hardworking guy, an Italian immigrant who left Italy with a vision to make his life better and his family's life better. Learned a lot from him and my mom. And honestly, every day I think about lessons learned as a kid. And so the easy answer is my dad and my mom too.
That's great. It gives you a good foundation to grow up in. But and also imagine you spend a fair amount of time mentoring, and people often ask me, so I'll ask you this question, which is, how do you find the time to do that with all the other things on your list?
You don't find the time, you make the time. It has to be a priority. I'm really proud of the fact that I've surrounded myself with a bunch of really capable, really smart people, but you have to take the time to pick the people that want to be mentored and then have a lot more to offer when you spend the time with them. So, Kevin, every day has its challenges, but you just have to make the time. I think you know that, right?
I think that's well put, right? And if I ever, are struggling, I just remember all the help I got along the way and say, it's the least we could do. And nothing's more than rewarding than seeing people you worked with exceed what they thought was capable.
I'm 100% with you on that one. Nothing more gratifying than see the people that took the chance on you to join the company and have achieved their own success. I think it's fabulous.
What's the best career advice you've ever gotten?
I had a boss early in my career say, even if you are smart, let's assume you are for now and we'll debate it later, everyone works hard. So you have to work hard, but also find ways to work smart. So the concept of working smart wasn't intuitive to me, but I think it's some of the best advice I've ever got. You can always find ways to work harder, but you've got to find creative ways to be getting more out of the time you have and working smart.
Working smarter. I think that's a tremendous thing for all of us to be able to do. Most of us work too many hours. So work and too many hours in front of the Zoom these days. So I think that, working smarter is a good theme. And overall, I didn't ask, but I usually ask, how's your business done during COVID?
We'll never be satisfied enough to say fantastic, but I think that there were a lot of challenges, and I'm really proud of the results we've generated. I think we're sort of at this coming out of the pandemic inflection point where all the hard work's about to turn to the next level of success. So I think we survived well, is the way I'd put it, and positioned ourselves for the next phase of growth really well in the back end of the pandemic.
And do you have any thoughts on what people are calling the hybrid work, or what's work going to be like in the future other than different?
Yeah, well, first of all, guys like us that traveled all the time, for me, I'd like to find a middle ground. Like, this business of being in my home office all the time is highly overrated. But I think we do, back to the working smart thing, need to figure out the right balance. And I think we've been preaching to our customers for a long time that being on site all the time is overrated. It's an expense that doesn't benefit anyone. So I think that we will capitalize on what we've learned during the pandemic through necessity and make it part of regular. I think that we'll find the best of both worlds, be on site when it matters, and to work efficiently and remotely when we can.
I agree with that. And I think the best figuring out a new way and what the right balance is what it's all about, right?
Absolutely.
We took too many trips that we didn't need to take. Sometimes there's nothing better than being in person. So
I would agree completely. And is it bad that I miss TSA? You're really desperate when you start missing the security lines.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, Mike Maiolo, thank you for being on the CEO to CEO podcast this week. It was great to have you on. And for our audience out there, tune in next week to hear another great CEO talk about their careers and their lessons learned. Thanks.
Thank you for joining the CEO to CEO podcast. Join us next time as we uncover data strategies to support mergers, acquisitions, divestitures with the world's top CEOs.